Alrighty, so I wanted to talk a little bit about surveillance because someone asked me why all of this, or what was the thing that set it off. To be completely honest with you, for a lot of it's common for Black Muslims. It's also the common for the children of people whose parents work in surveillance or whose parents work overseas in intelligence, computers, IT. Basically, when you grow up in certain countries, like the Middle East, or like Iran, or just certain countries, right? You will end up surrounded by people who work in surveillance. If you like, I was about to say I don't have any relatives who are cops, but I do. When I was younger, I had no relatives who were cops. Okay, but I do know that when people are related to cops, they grow up around police. If you don't fall into that world and you don't do what everybody else does, eventually you end up being surveilled because you're not like them. It's just kind of how our world works. That's how it works, like on a domestic scale. And then when you're looking at people who lived overseas, it happens on an imperialistic scale. Sorry, I don't have like my good air purifier, so my skin is breaking out already. Yes, already. I don't have my activated carbon one, so I have a pimple already. Anyway, that's why you need activated carbon air filters, air purifiers. So, so that's sort of like the background, okay, and that it's pretty common for people, young people who grow up overseas to end up surrounded by people in surveillance. If you don't end up being cool with people like that and you don't go into surveillance, you end up being surveilled. What a surprise. Um, but so that's a natural part of like growing up overseas in certain contentious areas. And then the other aspect of it is that I'm an anarchist, which everybody knows. And around, I want to say 20, I've forgotten, I get my years mixed up all the time right now. I want to say 2015, 2016, or something like that. I ended up living in an anarchist collective. I've talked about it a lot. It sucked. I don't recommend, I don't think I'm really into any kind of collectives. I just lived there because I needed to. I needed to have a place to live. Uh, when I first moved in there, so okay, so actually, let's start at the end. I left. I left, and I probably left because of violence that began because of surveillance. And it's likely, I'm like 95% sure that one of our housemates was an infiltrator. It's super, super common. I've said this before, if you live within the empire, you are going to end up you're going to end up surveilled. If you do anything political, it will be infiltrated and you will be surveilled. It can happen on a small scale or it can happen on a large scale. For us, I believe that we were infiltrated by an FBI agent. I don't think he was an informant. I actually think he was an agent. Based on the tactics that he used were the exact same tactics that my landlord used. And so that was the end. The start was, what someone was like, why, what's the big deal, like you're not really doing anything, and it's like, yeah, of course I'm not. No one is. Like, when you end up surveilled and you're a leftist, you don't have to be doing anything. You really, really, really don't. Like, we don't have a real movement within the United States. It just doesn't exist. It's not a real thing. But what they want is they want to make sure that those ideas don't affect other people. They want to keep ideas about leftism highly isolated and almost never acted upon. It's okay if white people become sort of lefty and then sort of like spread some of their ideas. It's okay because most white people are white supremacists because that's the environment that we live in, and they will always make sure that those leftist ideas are confined primarily to white people. If anyone else, then it's largely non-black people. So the segregation and the hierarchy within the United States remains the same. I did not necessarily consider myself part of a community when I lived in that collective, but it doesn't really matter, okay? Because I still change things within the household because I've been going back through it for the last few hours about things that I did that ended up having me be reviled. When I first got there, I was a guest. I was not a housemate. So I came in as a guest. And I did not tell people that I was super grossed out, but they had the most horrific roaches. Like, oh my God, it was like a roach infestation, and they were small, and they were big, and they were everywhere. And there were only like a few places in the house where they didn't show up, but they were really disgusting. Um, there were so many, okay? So it was a major infestation. So we went from that to, that was when I first moved in, and it was filthy. And I didn't know this at the time, but prior to me living there, oh my God, it was even grosser. They had bed bug infestations. Somebody used to pee in bottles and save it, not because of a health issue. Like, I've had to pee in buckets before. Like, in Niagara Falls, I had to pee all the time in a bucket. I couldn't go into my bathroom because of the toxins in the bathroom. And like with my last house, I had to start peeing in a bucket because they kept like turning off my water and doing all kinds of weird shit to keep me from being able to access other parts of the house safely. But no, there was some strange dude who lived in the house, and he peed in bottles and he saved them. I also think he may have doo-dooed in them, but I'm not totally sure about that second part. But I do know that he used to save bottles, and everybody was like, it was just very dysfunctional. Let's put it that way. There was like a lot of weird shit that people just sort of like went along with, that like that just okay. So someone got bed bugs and they didn't tell the entire house about it for I think about 10 months, and then the whole house became infested. They got rid of the infestation, but they ended up having roaches a little while later. I came in as a guest, and then I ended up becoming a housemate. After I became a housemate, like I'm not the cleanest person in the world. I don't care that much about germs, but within a communal space and within doing like industrial stuff, I actually am very, very clean. I was not super judgmental about the roaches, but I was obviously grossed out. And so one of the things that I began doing was I began cleaning a lot. I began organizing certain things, and I would wipe things down if they were like grimy, and put them away. My mom is obsessively clean, so she kind of taught me to do things like this. My mom's obsessively clean, and she also is a nurse, so she's used to working in industrial spaces that are dirty. And so one of the things that she's instilled in me is to always keep industrial filth like confined, like because it spreads illness. So I don't care that much about germs. People think I care a lot about germs. I care a lot about airborne disease, and I care a lot about when it can infect people. So after I moved in, there was a white boy whose mom was really, really dirty. And it was so funny. He always wanted to live in a clean house, but nobody helped him. And me and the white boy weren't close or anything like that. I thought he was nice. A little cowardly, but nice. Most of them were a little cowardly. And he started cleaning with me. And when he started cleaning with me, somebody else got this roach stuff to get rid of the roach stuff, this pesticide, and it was safe and not harmful to animals because it was a gel. And over time, we got rid of the roaches. We had this huge meeting after I first moved in, because they used to have house meetings after I first moved in. I came up with, this is not radical. So I know that people are like, that's not that big a deal. Cleaning is not that big a deal. It is. I thought it wasn't. It is. Cleaning. The thing that I came up in the house meeting was a preparation plan because SF is like obviously on the fault lines. We have major, major earthquakes, major, major serious like people can die, okay? And the fires had just started getting really, really bad. So I decided that I would put together like an emergency preparedness plan, and I would get fire extinguishers, and I would get these like roll down fire ladders. They're really cool. If you live in a building with a lot of building code violations, it's a really good idea to get one. They're not that expensive. I never actually did this plan. And part of the reason why I never did the plan was because I came up with it. People thought it was a great idea. Everybody wanted to put the money towards it. And during that conversation, I made one of the white men extremely insecure. And and from that point on, we had a disagreement over candles. And from that point on, he became extremely hostile to me. And it started off as a small, tiny disagreement, as it does with white men. And it exploded into basically like a year and some change later, me being violently physically assaulted by strangers in random violence at a time and a place where I would have only been noticed by my housemates. And I was just randomly assaulted by children who were out late, who happened to see me standing off to the side. Okay. But that tiny disagreement resulted in months of harassment. He had always harassed women in the house. He had always, always, always been super aggressive to the other woman who was a woman of color and ran the Food Not Bombs page. Food Not Bombs give out. He used to just start little arguments with her about timing and about doing things properly, and he was doing it at the time where they had severe roaches and a severe bed bug infestation, arguing with her over the days for when to put out food. Nobody thought that was strange. Nobody thought it was strange that for years he had harassed all the women in the house, and that if any of those women were women of color who did anything to help people, that he was much more severely aggressive with them. So in the years that they had these severe bed bug infestations, like people were covered in bites for years, years. And during the time that they had this serious roach infestation, he was arguing with her about where they should get the food from, what days to give out the food. And it was her Food Not Bombs thing. Like, she ran it. I think it's actually technically anarchist or something like that, but she ran the whole thing because she did the cooking. And he was a chef. A chef who drank aloe vera every fucking morning. No one thought that was strange. When I moved in, he was much more caustic with me, and he started throwing out my food every single day. When I lived in this apartment, I would make I would make a big meal, and I would split it between the day, and I would have it for breakfast, and I would have it for like sort of like an afternoon lunch. And he began throwing out my food, saying he was cleaning. And I didn't know this, but he also spent over a year talking shit about me behind my back after that meeting to a white woman who I thought was not my friend, but I thought we were on friendly terms. And she told me after a year of like his abuse and his violence that he had been talking shit about me, and she didn't think it was right, but I didn't know what to say. I mean, you're not nice to him either. But I never spent like a year talking shit about him. He used to slam doors. If I was sitting somewhere, he would walk through that room and he would slam the door closest to me. He would drop things. he would stomp really, really loudly. He would do all these things. And so this went on for about a year until it escalated so badly. And nobody would help me and everybody would ignore it. And it got so badly and I just screamed and I flipped out and I was like, you're a fucking Klansman. Like you're just a nasty person and you're a fucking Klansman. That's another thing that he would do when I would do like food, because we would prepare food for the house. When I would prepare food, he would always try to like intervene in some way. He would become very meddlesome. Like the reason why I never even got the fire hydrants and did the emergency preparedness thing was because he kind of turned people against it and began talking about the cost and telling people in the house that we didn't have the money and basically getting them to think that they should not give me the house cards so that I could put it together. So I gave up. And he did the same thing with our food, like with the nights that I would prepare the food, because I'm actually a good cook and he's not. And he just did something. I can't even remember what it is now. I could think about it if I wanted to. But he he did something super caustic to prevent people from coming to have food at the time that I was preparing the food and was like throwing shit around and making all this extra noise. And so I just screamed at him and I was like, my God, you're such a fucking Klansman. Like, you've been doing this for months. You've been throwing away my food. You've been fucking with my things. You've been talking shit about me behind my back. Like, fuck you, you fucking Klansman. And that explosion where people finally had to sit and acknowledge that we used to have black people in the house. They all left. There was a black guy who was like talking about self-defense. His white girlfriend fucked one of the white trans women who came from fucking Chicago and was in a relationship with a gay man who was also a man of color. Somehow, all the white people who normally are not attracted to each other and normally don't fuck each other are all fucking each other, and the black people move out. The people of color spend months at a time away from living there, and everybody who contributed to a good, strong household suddenly is no longer invested in it. And it, like, whatever, we're all queer, so it doesn't really, really matter about the sexuality part, but it's really strange how people who would never, ever, ever be attracted to each other, and typically we're not, suddenly we're fucking each other and betraying their partners, and their partners were all the people of color. Anyway, and so you couldn't fuck me out of my house. Like, you couldn't physically fuck me out of my house. You also couldn't like throw away all my food, and you also couldn't like prevent me from caring about emergency preparedness stuff. So the solution was to try to destroy my relationships with other people. And that was the way that they would do it, like that he did it, which was behind my back by easily manipulating all the white people. And I wasn't planning on leaving until I was. He said he was leaving. He actually said he was going to move out, even though all the white girls cried and pretended to be scared of me because I called a white man a Klansman for acting like a Klansman. He said he was moving out, and within about 10 days, a week or 10 days, I was brutally assaulted while I was standing outside, and a bunch of random kids came over and fought me. And I did fight them off. And I kind of won, but I was being beaten for a while. And it did not make sense. It never made sense. And I told people how much I disliked him, how much I didn't trust him, but I never told people that I thought he was a federal agent, but I always believed that he was. I don't think I've ever actually told anyone up until I did a live a couple of weeks ago that I always believed he was a federal agent, and I always believed that he got those people to do that. The one thing that he used to do to like help people was he didn't help people. He didn't like people. I don't like people either, but I help people in other ways where I don't necessarily have to interact with a bunch of people I don't like. He was a white man from Houston, Texas, who helped indigent youth by teaching them how to skateboard. I was brutally beaten by some indigent youth who lived in that neighborhood where he also used to teach people how to skateboard. They don't know how to cover their tracks. They just make it so obvious because they can't be bothered. Like, they just don't care. Anyway, in case you're wondering, like, how have things escalated to the point that they're at, that was a decade ago. That was over 10 years ago, and I was deprived of my home then. And like I said, I've told people about it. Like, I told people about the assault, but I never told people that I thought that he was behind it. But the funniest thing that he and some other people have in common is he used to always get really, really upset about the rules. And the one rule that I always broke was I always watched pirated movies and I didn't use a VPN. And he would lose his shit over it. And he was really, really angry over it. And these people also lost their shit over me watching pirated movies. And so there are certain things that they all have in common, and that's the way that you can tell that certain people are agents. But yeah, I wanted to share that because, like, I could write it all out, but I honestly think that it's a little bit easier to understand, like, how does policing work? How does surveillance work? How do you, like, it's not it's not a thing where you're the bad guy and you're like really working at like planning to take down the system, man. Within the empire, you don't have to really do anything. You can simply have leftist views and be not white and not a man. And those ideas, when they think about it, people started cleaning an entire house that had been extremely dysfunctional for years. People began getting rid of infestations in a house where people have been okay with discomfort for years. What happens if you actually mobilize people who are very, very politically engaged and you get them to drop the shame of not wanting to be a part of something, not wanting to clean? Because, like, feminized labor, like, not doing feminized labor is why all movements fail. Refusing to do refusing to do feminized, oh my God, refusing to do feminized labor is why movements fail. Okay? What happens if you can get a bunch of politically motivated people to begin thinking in and acting in ways where they prioritize doing feminized labor for the health of everyone? You equally distribute resources and you do more than just sit around and talk theory. Okay? So that's what it is. And it's a long story and it's a long background to explain why would that suddenly provoke someone to wanting to physically harm you. Well, that's why. That's how movements begin. Okay? If you can get other people involved and you can get other people to work towards a common goal and they don't associate it with shame or slavery, okay? Because doing feminized labor is associated with slavery. If you can get them to want to do that and to take a certain amount of pride in doing that, you are going to get people much more willing to do more than just be upset and to just be angry. If you can get people to actually act on their discomfort, if you can get people to want to change an uncomfortable situation, you begin not to do it in words, but you start to, in actions, you start to get people to fight to change their circumstances. And that is very, very different from just sitting around and bitching all day, but also being comfortable living with bed bugs and roach infestations. So that is where the surveillance began a decade ago. And it probably ramped up when I started doing more advocacy around Novavax, vaccine advocacy and vaccine advocacy and air purification and things like that, especially masking. And I'll probably make another live about like why the masking is so important and why that affects like me being kind of like surveilled a million times a day.